Hello and welcome to our new talk by the invitation of the LSVD, the Lesbian and Gay Federation in Germany. Tonight's topic is In Danger, LGBTI in Poland and Hungary. I am Alfonso Pantisano and I will be your host for this evening. Hungary and Poland have made LGBTI their new public enemy. While LGBT-free zones are being proclaimed in our neighboring country and sexual and reproductive rights are being massively attacked, Hungary is denying transgender and intersex people legal recognition and now wants to anchor discrimination against LGBTI people in the constitution. Why has this massive backlash been around for a few years and fuels the restrictive policies and hateful rhetoric? What does fuel it? These and other questions will be at the core of tonight's discussion. We have invited two guests with whom I will have the pleasure to exchange some thoughts on these important issues. Our first guest comes from Poland. She's representing Warsaw Pride and she is Julia Maciocha. And we have Krisztina Kolos Orban from Transvanilla in Hungary. Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. So,
hi everyone.
Hello, Tina. Thank you very much, Tina and Julia, for joining us tonight. And we have been speaking on these issues about what's going on at the moment in your respective countries now quite for some time. I remember having a talk with you, Krisztina, back at the end of May. Well, it was the middle of May. It was on the International Day of Homophobia and Transphobia on the 17th of May. And I remember that a couple of days later, the Hungarian parliament was supposed to pass that horrific law that was going to deny the rights to transgender people. Back then, you were very fearful that the situation in Hungary was going to worsen a lot. And it truly has. What has happened, seeing it from your eyes and heard by your ears that are so connected to the community?
Thank you, Alfonso, and I want to thank LSVD for organizing this discussion, and I'm happy to be here today. So when we talked on the 17th of May, the voting was expected to happen on the 19th of May, so 2 days afterwards, and we all know that it has passed the legislation and it has practically made impossible for trans and intersex people to change their gender markers in any of their official and non-official documents. And in addition, because of the closed male and female name lists we have in Hungary, the change of first names again is possible to one which reflects the real gender of a person. So despite all the international fuss that this law proposal created, the government kind of pushed it through. And since then, all those applicants who have applied for legal gender recognition before, we are talking about almost 100 persons, they are getting their rejections based on the new law. Their request is denied. There was someone who was waiting so far that like 2 weeks ago got just an answer to her application, which was filed 2 years ago. So this is crazy what is happening. And all our fears were kind of real as it turned out, because we have more and more people in the country whose gender expression is not matching their identity, which we never had before, because we had a process for legal gender recognition, which was functioning pretty well, which we don't have now. So people are facing everyday discrimination, humiliation in all kinds of contexts when seeing a doctor, going to the post office, trying to buy something, or in all kinds of scenarios when you have to state your name and show your ID, people are questioned. And it's something that Hungarian society is not used to. So there is more and more of this. And with all the things that are following up this piece of legislation with the new proposal to the constitutional law and other laws that you have mentioned, as our community is more and more attacked, there is more and more fear, and trans people, I can tell you, Alfonso, are really in panic. People just don't know what to expect and how they can navigate their life. Access to trans-specific healthcare was always an issue. and it's not getting better. It's getting worse, and there are lots of question marks, and what was so far really unstable is really something that we can lose the next day, anytime, we know. And it's just people want to flee the country. They want to seek asylum somewhere, although practically speaking, they have no right to claim asylum somewhere, but people just feel like that. People feel that they cannot live their lives, and they have to escape the country in any ways. And I mean, it's really devastating, and it's really difficult because I don't feel that panic myself, but I just don't know what to tell to people. And obviously we cannot promise anything because we just don't know what is coming next.
Yeah, so, well, we know what the government is planning, but we are about to talk about it then in a short while, because as we have already mentioned, the constitutional law is supposed to be changed, and there is a proposal that has been discussed and will be discussed in Parliament, and might bring some more drastic changes to the actual rights that we have at this particular moment in time in Hungary. Now, Hungary is not the only country from the European family that is facing such tragic problems towards our community and minorities. Poland is also at the moment almost at the forefront, together with Hungary, when trying to have a backlash in human rights and rights for LGBTIs, for women and other minorities. Julia, you have been in charge for Warsaw Pride now for a couple of years, starting as a volunteer, and you're now managing all the prides as a president of the organization that are happening in Poland. Now, when we hear that countries are organizing prides, we usually think that they have quite a lot of rights. They can use the room that they have in public spaces, and they can basically go into the streets and show their pride and their colors. The diversity that we believe is supposed to be shown in pride parades is something that is not really happening in Poland, because you're really fighting for core values at the moment and for fundamental rights. What is the situation at the moment in Poland?
Yes, the situation in Poland right now is for sure not very happy and smiley and optimistic, but the case is that we don't actually have pride, and this is true. When you think about pride, you think about this colorful march, a lot of fun, celebration of history, of art, of queer culture. And we do it, of course. We are also having it sometimes, but mostly equality marches, prides in Poland are still demonstrations, riots, still fights, more than parties, let's say like this. So of course, the country is super divided, and in some cities we have a really dangerous situation where marches are being attacked, and not only with stones, but sometimes with fire. And we had last year, we had a situation of self-made bomb being brought to a march in Lublin. On the other hand, on the western part of Poland, we have pretty happy, quiet, peaceful marches, people having fun. This year, for the first time, we held a march, transnational march that was being held between Germany and Poland. So situation is really difficult to explain sometimes, because on one hand we have LGBT-free zones and massive actions against LGBTQ people made by the government, by the church. But on the other hand, we have the society that want to go forward, that wants to educate themselves and want to support the equality causes. So it's really hard for me to say something like one strong thing about the situation in Poland right now, because it has so many nuances that it's really hard to maintain this one piece.
What we can maybe highlight is that it's a little technicality, but there is a lot of meaning behind it, and it's maybe something worth discussing, because we are basically talking about, we call them pride marches, but you guys in Poland have decided to call them equality marches.
Yes.
Can you explain to us why you have made this maybe little difference that has such a big impact on the message that you are transporting?
It started with a quality parade, actually, in the year 2000, so 20 years ago. Our founder, Szymon Niemiec, he already stated that it's not going to be a typical pride, because already then and now, even stronger, we recognize that we are not the only minority that is fighting and struggling in Poland, fighting for equality, struggling for their rights.
Well, yes, we have seen the pictures of all the women demonstrating for the right of abortion, and yeah.
We had also a huge protest of people with disabilities 2 years ago when they were occupying our parliament.
Yeah.
And even not even thinking about now, we are also thinking about the future. Even if we are going to get the rights that we want, in the future there are going to be more and more minority groups, or the groups that are going to be in danger of exclusion. So what we decided is that to fight the same oppressor, we have to come together and fight together. So of course our parades and marches, they are super rainbowish, and of course, for many, especially hateful people or right-wing people, it's only about gays, not even the rest of the letters of the acronym of LGBTQI people. But for us, it's for everyone. We are trying to include as much people as we can. We were the third country that actually Greenpeace joined us with his climate demands to acknowledge that we as an LGBTQ people are a part of the bigger society. And we are also the part of other minorities. It's not like we are only being told by one story, you know? So that's why Equality Parade, that's why we have 12 demands now. They contain, of course, specific demands for LGBTQ people, for trans people, especially because their situation in Poland, it's still very, very bad. But also we are adding people with disabilities, because again, LGBTQ people can have some disabilities. We are also adding women's rights. We are also adding refugees and citizens from different countries that might be right now in a state of war. So
let me maybe try to ask now Krisztina to join this particular topic, because Krisztina, in an earlier talk with me, was highlighting that at the moment there is a bit of a problem in the LGB movement getting all the attention, Krisztina, and then all the other minority groups not getting the attention that maybe they also deserve on their particular issues. What's your view on this particular situation? And is there anything that you can take from Julia's perspectives, the way they are handling the situation?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So before I say anything, what I'm saying, I'm talking about structural issues, and it's not about different movements or people involved at all. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate everyone's work, but we can observe, and I'm mostly seeing things from the Hungarian perspective. Obviously, I'm not familiar with the Polish context that much in that sense. But what I see in Hungary, that different human rights movements, or let's say movements, are silenced and ignored and left behind by society and mostly the government. So the shrinking space for civil society can be observed. Different movements, like the movement fighting for women's rights or disability rights or Roma rights, is kind of vanishing in the country. There are only pro-government organizations who are basically doing nothing what they should do for those being the most marginalized in Hungary. So that we can observe. And whilst this is happening, LGBT organizations compared to that are basically flourishing and still having funds and being visible, being loud, being able to fight for rights. despite being very much attacked, just like many other groups. But we can kind of raise our voice still. Even trans organizations, even transvanilla is in a better situation like many women's rights organizations in the country, which is crazy, I believe. And what I can see, and that's a very structural issue, that I believe intersectionality is important, that we come in all sizes and shapes in the LGBT or LGBT movement. That is very important, but we cannot take over the general human rights framework and cannot do the work for everyone, because that's just not our mission to do. And for many complex reasons, this is what I see kind of coming out of what is happening. And that is why I see a certain kind of danger or some risk in that. And I think different actors are aware of it. I've been talking to funders who kind of know it, but it's difficult for everyone involved to kind of address the situation. But I do believe that general human rights work should not be done by LGBT groups. It should be done by general human rights organizations, and we are entitled to talk in the name of those whom we represent, whom are in our mission. Obviously, we have to support each and every other movement, and we have to support them. And that's the key word. We cannot represent everyone. We are here to support other movements. And again, saying it's not against LGBT organizations, I believe it's a structural issue, and there are many reasons behind what I have observed.
So there is a question of it's a question of funding, as I understand. It's a question of who gets the money by whom, who has the power to basically then push forward with their projects and with their ideas and with their messages. It's also, as I understand correctly, a question of intersectionality in how good and well do diverse groups interact with each other, exchange when they plan a demonstration, announce it to the others and ask them to join and call their communities together. So it's a bit of a real structural question on how to solve this problem at the moment on the Hungarian side. The Polish side, as Julia was describing it, they are basically working on it. So are you, Julia, using the intersectionality aspect of things when getting out with your messages and with your parades, or do you invite other groups? How do you do it?
I guess I really understand what Tina is saying, because of course there is a big question of who can actually speak or who can speak for the whole group. And this is something that every city, so every group is organizing by themselves. But what we are actually observing right now in Poland, I have even like this saying on my profile photo on Facebook, we have so many things to protest about that it's really hard sometimes to decide. And it's impossible for many people to be on the streets every day. So on Monday, I have a climate strike, and on Thursday, I'm going to women's strike, and on Wednesday, I'm supporting trans issue, and on Friday, I'm supporting gays and lesbians and everything else. So it's also an idea, or as I've been feeling it, it's also an idea to put people together, to not to waste their energy, so they can put this energy to greater good, greater fight. But also, these people are our potential allies. So if someone is open enough to think about, I don't know, rights of refugees or feeling empathy for refugees, then we can actually approach them and explain them the situation of LGBTQ people that have to escape the countries or escape their own houses because of the homophobic family. So there is also this huge place for dialogue that we just don't want to waste. But also, I think we should acknowledge the division, because Tina is talking about organizations and the fundings and the structural issues. And I'm talking about demonstrations, which are quite different kind of topic. And it's also the like one time per year, an event one time per year. So
yeah. So let's try to figure out, we have mentioned already the church, right-wing movements, but one of our questions that we're trying to answer tonight is what is fueling this restrictive policy and hateful rhetoric, and who are the forces behind it? And are there similarities between Poland and Hungary? So we have established the church. Is it just the Catholic Church, or are there other religious groups that are basically fighting and fueling this rhetoric of a hate at the moment in Poland and in Hungary? Krisztina.
Okay, so in the Hungarian context, it's kind of religious actors, but I wouldn't name them church in the Hungarian context. It's and since we have a government who is leading all this, basically don't need anyone else. So it's coming from politicians, from right-wing politicians, from Christian Democrats in the governmental party, but it's from the whole government and Fidesz, and there are also NGOs, I believe. We can also mention them. Also, I think in the Polish context, we know some NGOs or institutions that are really fueling this. And in Hungary, it's not that much the religion or religious arguments as part of this whole anti-gender thingy, which we are part of as such and attacked as LGBT and trans people. But it's more like the nationalistic approach that who are the real Hungarians, who are a threat to the nation and our Christian culture. But the actors definitely mostly politicians supported by religious actors, not that much church.
Okay.
And NGOs.
Okay. And Julia, how is it with your view on things in Poland?
In Poland, I can strongly say this is the Catholic Church, and it's the whole institution as well as particular priests that are fueling, but also spreading the fake news, of course. And the episcopate, so this head of the church, is also issuing a statement against LGBTQ people. So it's for sure the church, as well as the government, of course, and the NGO that Tina mentioned. I believe we share some of the actors on this side between Hungary and Poland. But this is quite also maybe important fact that the minority churches, so the small religious groups in Poland, they are not against LGBTQ people, because a few years ago we invited them to Equality Parade. And now, when a few years ago we decided to make this dialogue, because they weren't like proactively attending within the parade, but they were meeting with us, they were talking with us. Right now they are finding themselves on our side, on the side of people that are being threatened. So I wouldn't, in our case, I wouldn't say that this religion is the important factor. I would say that more the institution is working against us.
Okay. Thank you very much also for this insight on this particular topic. And do you see now any strategy on how to dialogue with the communities to give them strength so that they try to redirect their listening more to our issues than to what these religious groups or institutions are basically spreading? Is there a way of divert the dialogue, or is it very hard because they have a very huge and powerful voice?
I myself, I'm not a person of belief, so it's really hard for me to talk about their community. But I guess that this is something that they have to do by themselves. Like, there is this particular lesson that Polish people of faith have to learn. And what we are trying to do is to show them that there are many churches abroad in different countries that have no reason to attack LGBTQ people, and they can have their own faith without being disturbed by equality parade. And more and more people do actually understand that. But I think this is still a long time to go.
Yeah, it seems so. Now, Krisztina, a couple of days ago, we heard the news of an EU parliamentarian who is very homophobic and who apparently was at a so-called sex party somewhere in Brussels and then apparently tried to escape. It has made news worldwide. In Rome, they have, presented now a new wall on a building, a new painting on a building's wall. That's what I want to say, with his face on it, and in a gay leather outfit. So there is a lot of attention internationally on this particular topic, and on this it's a very particular thing where a lot of homophobic people, especially we get to hear a lot about politicians who are very strong in their views and in their rhetoric and in their appearance. At the end, somehow we realize they have some sort of connection to a gay life and homosexuality, bisexuality on their own. Has this topic been discussed in Hungary, and if yes, how?
Okay, so that's a nice question, Alfonso. Thank you for that. It was fun. First of all, it was really funny when we found this out. His name was praised often in the past, so I kind of knew about the gossip. I didn't know if it was true or not, and I didn't care. And the Hungarian social media just
so sorry,
up.
let me interrupt you. Let me interrupt you. There was rumors about him in the past already. Okay.
Yes, I've heard things from people, so okay. I think it was not a top secret. It was just not public and secret anyway. So, and he already have resigned on Sunday, and when I saw that, I was like, oh gosh, it's so strange. So maybe he was blackmailed or something. So, but 2 days after, we realized what was behind, and the Hungarian social media has blown up. The amount of memes and jokes you cannot imagine, I think we will never forget. And it brought smile to our face for several days at least. I'm still smiling, so it's awesome. And on the other side, it's not a problem what he did. I just don't care. The issue is that he was the person who was leading the drafting of the fundamental law of Hungary, which is the constitution, and which set out marriage is between a man and a woman, and that's the only kind of family that is accepted in Hungary. And I think that's the issue with all this, that how can you then? And in Hungary, I think the news got to most of the people that something happened, let's put it this way, because the governmental media and the state-controlled media, which reaches mass amounts of people, was covering it really lightly. Like he went to a party and violated the restrictions in Brussels, and kind of that was the story. And they didn't report where he went or what has happened there. So and then the other kind of rhetoric is that he had already resigned, so the story is over. So we get a lot of questions on how that will influence Hungarian people and society in Hungary. We just don't know. I just don't know, because I have seen a lot of memes and a lot of jokes and I know everything. I just don't know if an elderly woman in a village gets the same amount of information. I just cannot know. Obviously, I mean, it's funny. That's what I can say. And it's really sad that this has happened to someone who is 60 years old and was doing it all his life and was hiding this part of his life. I think that's the really sad factor in that.
Absolutely, I completely agree. At the first moment, it's kind of, it's kind of funny, and it's kind of what it usually was to me. I'm a human being, and the first thing I did is I laughed, and then I said, oh, another one, because it's very typical for many of these politicians who are so outspoken and have this hateful rhetoric against the community. But then again, I felt a lot of sadness, as you said, because then I realized how old this man is, what life he's leading, and what picture he has to keep up of himself, and he has to deny who he might be for such a long, long time, and all the lies that are involved with it, and the fear that he must have felt when he basically tried to escape the location where he was. Well, yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it must be horrific, you know, when you know that game is over, and that must be very, very problematic. But then again, and this whole political drama always comes also with a personal drama, and you know, and it affects not only himself but the family and the people that admire and love him. So yeah, but it's important to realize how the media is transporting it and how the society is talking about it, and yeah, it's important to know that, you know, there is another truth also there when such news come up and movements start to spread such hateful rhetoric.
We are waiting for Poland.
Yeah. So now we're waiting for Poland. Yeah, but we're waiting for Poland. You know, waiting for Poland is maybe a good keyword for me, because over the last couple of years, this is something very strange to observe. Over the last couple of years, whilst the anti-gay rhetoric is rising by the governing politicians, the acceptance of LGBTI in the population is also rising. Or am I wrong?
Yes, it is.
So we have at the moment, we have seen it at the last election, we have seen a country which is split in half. We have 50% of people that are for the government and are following their rhetoric. And we have almost 50% on the other side who are basically saying, this is not the way we want to continue to live. This is not the way how we want to interact. This is not how we want to be perceived by other countries that are our neighbors and non-neighbors. So is there a power, is there a hope for change that is around the corner, or how do you see the situation at the moment?
I guess sometimes for me and for other activists, the only way to, you know, go through the day and do the work is to really believe that we are going to change something. And I finally found a peace with myself that I'm agreeing to accept that it is going to change someday, and I might not be there for it. It might happen after me, but I believe that this is going to change. The problem in Poland that I see is the biggest problem that I see right now is the lack of civil society. Polish people don't vote. Usually we have a voting percentage around 60–50% of people. So half of the people are not even going to the voting stations. And then we have people that were being raised in this kind of weird place where you shouldn't be the first. Like you should do, if you're not going to change anything, then everything is going to be fine. Even though if it's not fine, we are burning, but fine. So what I'm observing right now is, on one hand, the huge rise from young people. These people were being raised by the internet, by climate strikes, by activists being visible on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat. Oh my God, there were so many of these things. And I believe that there is a power in them that is going to change it. But we still have to remember that most of people want things to stay the same. And even though they are probably more accepting and they feel like, okay, LGBTQ people are not that bad because, I don't know, their granddaughter came out or someone from their family just came out. They still believe that money is the most important factor. And our government currently is giving people a lot of money. And it's really sad, but at the end of the day, if you are putting money on one side and an LGBTQ stranger on the other side, people are going to go for their own good, for their own benefits. And this is saddening, but this is true.
But do you think that the younger community in general, no matter what sexuality they have and what issue they might follow or what minority they belong to, or young people in general, they don't even need to belong to a minority, that they, because one day they will be voting. A lot of 16, 17, 15-year-olds at the moment are involved in so many issues and are being so loud about their views of their own future. Do you think that in a couple of years' time, when they will be able to go and cast their first vote, that things might be turning around?
I really hope so, because among young people, 75% are pro-equal partnerships. 75% of young people want equal partnerships in our country. It's huge. On the other hand, we have this small percentage of super far-right young people that are extra homophobic, extra xenophobic, and they are expressing the views of even extermination of some kind of people. But the problem right now, as I see, is that we have no politicians that they can actually vote for. In Poland, you are not choosing between right, centrist, and left. You are choosing between centrist and right. So even the centrists, I don't know why they are not reading the statistics, but they are scared to go pro-equality, pro-LGBTQ people, because they feel like the society is somewhere else 20 years ago. So the basic problem right now is that young people have no one to vote for. So it's great that they are going to be able to vote in the next few years, but are they going to be politicians that are going to be ready to start the fight then?
I see. So, Krisztina, can you relate to this particular movement within the younger crowd, or is it a bit different in Hungary?
What I can relate to is what Julia said at the very beginning, that we believe that things will change, but we just have to accept that we don't know when. That was something I really felt like. I feel you, Julia. That's the same feeling I have, that I believe that things will change. The Hungarian society is not that much homophobic and transphobic as the government is trying to play this. Of course, they can change things, but just society is not like that. And when it comes to younger generations, I also tend to believe that they are more supportive of different rights than the elder generations or older generations. But I mean that there is time until new generations grow up, and we would like to see change to happen before. And yeah, I mean, in Hungary, the political landscape is a bit different. It's also a country split into two parts. One is pro-government and the other one is against the government, but the second part is really fragmented. And with this split, the Hungarian government still can gain 2/3 in parliament, which is unbelievably undemocratic. And that's what keeps the system alive here. And it seems that now we are getting to the point, after a decade of Orban, that the opposition might stick together and might try to really win an election. I mean, that's a very difficult situation because they've been fragmented all the time. And what I just wanted to point out, that the opposition is pro-LGBT. There is no question that they wouldn't ban legal gender recognition. They publicly speak out on that. And they publicly support lesbian and gay and bisexual people. There is no problem with that. They just have no power. They have less than 1/3 in parliament. The right-wing Jobbik sometimes is not that publicly outspoken and supportive. So I mean, there are issues, but it's not that there are no parties who would speak for LGBT people. We have such parties, and they are pretty open on that, and some of them really progressive. So that's not an issue. The issue is the election system and the whole kind of system that was built in the past decade. And I believe that society would support rights for LGBT people. That's not an issue. It's another problem that we are facing here.
Now, talking about problems that we are about to face in Poland and in Hungary, we have just said at the beginning that Hungary is about to possibly change the constitutional law. A couple of amendments have already been made to the existing laws in regards to trans rights, as we have experienced already back in May. What is now the next move that the Hungarian government is trying to push through in regards of the constitutional law? How are they going to rewrite the constitution?
Yes, it seems that as soon as, because of the COVID-19 situation, that is an state of emergency introduced, they have to introduce some laws against LGBT people. And this time on 10th of November, the Minister for Justice have introduced proposals to the fundamental law, which is the Constitution of Hungary, and to other piece of legislations. One aim is to stop adoption for non-married couples in Hungary, clearly aiming to stop lesbian and gay people to adopt children officially. And the change is...
So you have to be married in order to be able to adopt.
Yes, that's going to be the case. There will be exceptions, but a minister has to approve those cases. So very likely gays and lesbians will not be allowed to adopt a child in Hungary formally. Even before, only single adoption was possible for them. So even though if they were coupled in a civil registered partnership, they couldn't adopt together, but singles could adopt. And that is kind of stopped by the government. And it affects everyone. It's not just same-sex couples. It's those singles who would like to adopt. It is those different sex couples who are not married will not be able to adopt easily in the future. So that's clear discrimination. The aim is clear. They even want to put in the fundamental law that the mother is a woman and the father is a man, which is crazy. Whatever that means and whatever the purpose is, it seems really childish, but nothing is more important to create some fuss. And also they would like to put in the constitution that Hungary protects children's right to their identity in line with their birth sex and their right to education according to our country's constitutional identity and system of values based on Christian culture. So this is kind of a sentence which is rather strange and can be used in different ways. We are afraid that it will limit the rights of trans kids to have and live according to their gender identity. It can ban LGBT education in schools, or it can mean a lot of things used by the government. And whilst they've been proposing these amendments to the Constitution, they have proposed other amendments, and one of them is about public money. And the huge fuss is created on LGBT issues. And basically with the same proposal, they are hiding a lot of public money, and that money will not be public money anymore, which means that people just cannot follow where it's spent and how it's spent. So, I mean, this is really crazy. It seems useless and baseless, and it hurts LGBT people again, and clearly in the middle of the pandemic. And that's not even enough. The government is in restructuring the human rights institutional framework in Hungary. We had two anti-discrimination bodies, and they want to scrap one of them and put it under the other, which is doing nothing for human rights these days. So, and that's again in the middle of the pandemic. That's the most important thing, to kind of change the whole structure of how discrimination is handled in the system.
We're going to talk about the pandemic, and we're going to talk about COVID and what it is causing to our community as well in a short while. Let's stick to the governmental procedures now that are trying to push for a more hateful society and environment for LGBTI eyes. I'd like to call in Julia to talk to us about what the government is planning at the moment in Poland, because next to the LGBTI free zones that we have heard of and that we are going to talk about as well later on, the government at the moment is trying to follow Russia's path. What can you tell us about it?
Yes, thank you. This is also important. I would like to highlight what Tina said, that our societies are not that homophobic as our governments are trying to convince you they are. Mm-hmm. And this is very important to remember that, of course, there are some people in Poland, in Hungary, that are violent or would like to hurt LGBTQ people, of course. But the majority of the society either don't want to do that or don't care. The tricky part is to convince the one that don't care to actually start to care. But the tricky thing that our government also is doing is to use NGOs and different social, political, religious actors to do what they would like to do, but they are afraid because of the European Union. So our government don't want to do anything about LGBTQ people right now. They are not talking about changing the constitution or making any laws or, I don't know, banning some people or changing things that they were before. What they do is they have their NGOs, their own right-wing NGOs, their own activists that are doing it for them. And one of these NGOs proposed this anti-propaganda, anti-homo propaganda law, similar to the law that is right now currently being implemented in Russia.
It's 7 years. It was implemented back in 2013.
Yes, and the law that is proposed by this NGO is pretty similar. It's not that harsh as the one in Russia. But what is happening right now? This is a civil proposal, so our government has to take care of it. They can't just put it on a side, on a shelf, and just forget about it. So they have 6 months to do that, which makes 5 more left for them. But the other important thing is, even if the European Union or anyone else would ask them, why would you do that? They can say, it's the right of the people, it's the voice of the people, it's our society that would like it to be done, even though it's not true. So they have right now 5 months to take care of this proposal. We don't think that they are going to accept it within the 100%, but we expect them to choose some of the small things from it. First of all, because they have to, because they promised it to their own voters and the church that is giving them money. But the second thing is, I think they just really would like to do that. The other thing is that is happening in terms of transgender people, is that in Poland we have no actual law concerning trans people. It is possible to legally change your documents and to legally transition, to have a legal transition, but it is using the loophole in our law. So what we are scared right now is that they're going to just simply cover it, and to cover it with the similar homophobic law that is being proposed in Hungary.
Now, what is very hard to understand for us who observe the whole situation is that Hungary and Poland are part of the European Union. And we have many laws that guarantee freedom of everything. Basically, we are the continent that has invented the context of freedom. Even though we have done so many tragedies around the world, but you know, this concept also comes from here. And when we observe what's happening back now in your countries, we all look at the European Union and ask them and expect them to do something about it. Now, the European Commission has presented a new LGBTI strategy, which sounds very, very, very important. What do you guys in Hungary and in Poland expect from it? And do you think that sanctions are helpful in order to stop these nationalistic anti-LGBTI policies in your respective countries? Krisztina.
When it comes to the EU, we are also wondering, and from our perspective, I remember in 2012, 8 years ago, I've been asking parliamentarians in Brussels, and I've been asking them, why don't you do something about the Hungarian government? So it was back then. And then they were rewriting the constitution themselves. No government can write a new constitution to a country, to my understanding. That should not happen in the European Union. And the European Union, since then, is just watching what is happening in Hungary and Poland. And the procedures, the Article 7 procedures are just going nowhere. We just watch them and nothing happens. So I believe that an LGBTI strategy for the EU is very important. Mm-hmm. Also, we all know the limitations of the EU in this field, not because there are no international human rights standards that apply here, but because just not the EU is the right mechanism to control them, because no one ever thought that they have to do that. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, when something like happened in Hungary in May, I think it was obvious that it's breaching EU values, but no particular EU law, because it's above that level. This is something that everyone was thinking is granted. And that kind of paralyzed the EU because they couldn't move. Yeah. And I don't know if it's too late to move but they should do something. And the strategy is important. It's a good question how they can implement with Hungary and Poland, because it's just impossible to imagine that they talk to our governments and they have hold them accountable. Mm-hmm. So it's a very complicated issue, and I just don't know how it can be useful. But the EU definitely has to push for its rights.
Well, we know that the EU is trying their best within their possibilities and limits to push the topic forward. And one very important key factor of it is the new LGBTI strategy that they have now finally, after many years of working on such a topic, they have finally now presented a strategy for it. And there are many politicians that are speaking out in the EU Parliament who are basically raising their voices, are bringing the subjects onto the table. The German presidency has also tried to highlight these issues in wherever possible. I have had a talk with Robert Biedron a couple of weeks ago, who was also highlighting the work that he is doing within the European Parliament, Julia. How do you see his efforts? Do you find that he is a strong voice for the Polish situation, or is there anything that you feel is missing in the work that the Polish politicians are doing within the European Parliament?
Of course, I have a lot of issues with Polish politicians. It doesn't matter from which side, but the problem with the European Union is that what Tina started, and I would like to finish about it, is the history. In 2004, when Poland was going into European Union, no one asked us about human rights, about LGBTQ people, refugees, minorities, nothing. Mm-hmm. So after the 16 years, now pushing the agenda of some basic human rights might bring us a lot of backlash, especially how our government is using this European Union pushes as an attack on Polish Catholic family values. So it's not that easy, and it has to be done very precise, and it's not an easy job to do. And if we are looking at Serbia, for example, right now, They have more rights in Serbia for LGBTQ people than in Poland. How can you imagine that if we are in European Union? And this is the basic thing that 16 years ago, no one thought about it. And right now, it might be too late because we entered as a Hungary, as a Poland, we entered this part of our government existence that they are not going to agree on that. They are going to put veto on it. And the worst possible scenario is that we are going to be out of European Union. And this is also a huge threat for LGBTQ people right now, because at least right now we can leave the country. At least now we can go abroad, find a job, make a life somewhere else. And it might be difficult if something like this is going to happen in Poland. And I'm not really fond of Polish MPs working in European Parliament. I don't really feel like they are representing well LGBTQ community, especially the work that they should do on our behalf. They are also not supporting proactively the strike and marches as much as we would like them to do. And this is something particularly not funny, because Terry Reintke, the German MP, is a stronger supporter for Black strikes and LGBTQ people and pride parades here in Poland than our own MPs. And this is something that makes me angry, of course, because you had people trust you. So why are you not using this, the opportunity that you got? And what is really important is that the leftist MPs are working better on local level, in national parliament, than within the European Union, where they can have more opportunities actually to use. So the work in Poland is also not being done well, in my personal opinion. But the problem also with this financials and how we want to take some money out of Poland or Hungary just because they are not following the rule of law, it's also very tricky. And we have to be, again, precise about it, because we have to ask ourselves, from whom are we taking this money? Because we are not taking them from our government. It's not, European Union money are not financing the governments. They are financing things in Poland, some projects, some exchanges, some students programs. So, of course, right now, it's a great tool for us as a propaganda tool to use to say, okay, because of the veto from Poland, the Erasmus program is not going to exist in Poland. So listen up, students and young people, you are not going to be able to go abroad for free. And this is a great argument for young people to hear, okay, so because of this government, I'm losing some of the opportunity. I would like to go abroad. I would like to visit some world. It would be better, and it would benefit our society to be within the European Union, to be within these values. But it's not 0-1, you know? So we always have to ask ourselves, what kind of money are we taking from people?
Okay. Krisztina, what is your take on this particular issue?
So it was very interesting to me what Julia said, that when Poland has joined the EU, that they've been not taking care of human rights. We don't have the same experience in Hungary. We have rather good legislation in most of the fields for LGBT rights, and that is because we have joined the EU. That's when they have created the anti-discrimination legislation. So kind of, it's not the same experience here. We knew that it is part of that, and we've been working in that context, and we've been feeling safe because we are in the EU, so we will all the time move forward. So I don't have that kind of experience that it was not taken into consideration before. So it's not a new thing for Hungary and Hungarians, I believe. Still, our government is trying to deny anything they can. And when it comes to take away money, that is actually something that we are asking for a long time, because we see no other tool in the EU. And it is important that I agree that it's not taking the money away from the government, but this is taking away the money from the government for which they are buying people to vote for them. And this is something that Julia also mentioned, that the government is giving money to people, so people choose the money and not the rights of others. So that is the money that has to be not taken back, but just withhold and say that certain restrictions come with this money. And whenever I talk about taking away money or withholding money from Hungary, that is not, I all the time say that it should not be about human rights. It's more about rule of law. It's more about democratic institutions. So it's not about violating trans people's rights. There were much bigger and broader issues even before. So that is why the EU has to do something. And if they can do nothing else but to say that we are not giving you that much money, then do that. Because then otherwise, why do you keep these countries in the EU? That's the big question.
Julia, you want to add something?
Yes, this is super important what Tina said, that for example, in Poland right now, the government is not saying that the money are being withdrawn or held because of the rule of law, but just because of the strikes, because of women, because of LGBTQ people. And this is also something very important to make sure that a certain minority groups are not going to experience more violence or more backlash from the society because of this action. So, as I said, I'm not against. We are also pretty happy with this idea of stopping the funding based on the rule of law. It's just that we have to be super precise about it.
So it's more about because of the violation of democratic issues, and not because of gay rights, who are part of the democratic process, but it's not because of them or the other group, but it's because these countries are violating fundamental democratic values that...
Not even the countries, this particular government
of course,
is violating.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that is not
clearer. You're absolutely
it's not
correct.
Strongly emphasized enough within this whole talk.
This is something, it's a learning for me as well tonight, to understand that it's basically important to highlight this very particular issue, that the money should be withheld and restrictions should be implemented and sanctions should be applied, because these particular governments are violating fundamental democratic core values. So that's something very important to realize, because quite often we speak about the countries, and when we speak about Hungary is and Poland is, but it's actually not. It's the governments behind it. So it's very important. So thank you. It's something that I needed to realize as well. And this is why we do talks like this one, to understand also why it's so important to exchange our thoughts and really see how our messages that we are trying to push forward being perceived then at the other end. So that's a very, very interesting take on it. Now, Julia, let's talk about the marches. Let's get back to the marches. It's important because the season is coming back. And and we need to realize, what can you guys do? How can we use intersectionality to become stronger? And what can we do? This is one question that Teresa Ertel has asked us in the chat. What can German pride parades, for example, pride organizations do in order to support Poland, or even though then Hungary? She's from Jena Pride. So what can we basically do to support you guys?
So the situation with COVID is pretty hard, and I'm very excited that probably we are going to hold at least some of the marches next year. But of course, due to COVID situation, this year we had to cancel most of the events. And this is also pretty hard because right now we have these huge strikes. People are going out on the streets, even though the pandemic in Poland is really, really taking lives. But on the behalf of what can prides from different countries do, there is like a lot of things, and it's hard for me to say because of the pandemic, but you are more than welcome to visit us, to come to us and exchange your knowledge, maybe invite us to school us from how are you doing the intersectional events, how are you using the new tools, new technology, especially right now during the COVID. There was this huge question about how to make a good online talks or online events. And what is really important for us, we are going to help them even after before the pandemic. What COVID has taught us is that there were a big group of LGBTQ people that we couldn't reach because of different financial privilege situations within their lives. And we reached them through online meetings, through online events. That's why we are going to still help them after pandemic is hopefully over. We had the first transnational Polish-Germany march. I hope that there are going to be some more of them, especially between the cities that are quite close to themselves, to each other, and were in a strong cooperation even before. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's even writing to us and say, great job, guys. You know, it's sometimes a small thing, sometimes even a talk to a different people from different perspectives is something that is opening us. But what we would like to invite the most, I guess, it's your artists. And I guess that it would be the best thing, and the thing that we are actually working on is to exchange Polish and German artists between our events to show how the queer culture looks like here, how the queer culture looks in your own places. Because in terms of drag queens especially, we are not that different, I would say. And I think we can learn a lot from this, you know, not very political, not very posh event, but just from simply being with each other.
Thank you. Krisztina, do you have any answer for the Pride organization in Vienna? What can German Pride organizations, do in order to support your causes?
Yes, I usually have two really basic answers to these type of questions. One way to support us is to raise awareness. Talk about the situation in Hungary and Poland, invite activists from these countries, make sure you know what is happening and you let others know what is happening. And whenever you see a call coming from us, just help us with whatever we ask, share something, sign a petition, whatever. That is one thing. And the other thing I all the time keep on repeating, first of all, make sure you are making life better on your local level for LGBT and especially trans people. Make sure you listen to trans voices in your community. Make sure you make life better for trans people around you. Because should there be 25 other countries doing great on LGBT rights in the EU, these two countries couldn't do what they do today. So make sure that you do your homework at home. I think that is my biggest advice, and help a local trans guy or trans woman. And I will appreciate that.
So let's talk about trans issues. Julia, the situation of trans people globally at the moment is really problematic on various levels. It's a very important issue to talk about, and especially in Poland, the trans community is going through the worst, as far as I understand it. What can you tell us about it?
So, of course, it's always hard for me to speak on behalf of trans community because I'm not the part of the trans community. But of course, what we are acknowledging, we as I'm trying to say about the general LGBTQ activist, is that, of course, trans part of the whole LGBTQ community is having the worst, especially in Poland. In terms of laws, it's really hard to get a transition. It's really hard to obtain a medical help, to get doctors that are not going to misgender you or actually hurt you somehow. So from my point of view, whenever like someone close to me is coming out as a trans person and they are thinking about leaving the country, I'm almost always supporting them, because this is not a country that you can easily pass, that you can find job, that you can have a pretty easy normal life. And what I'm talking about is that, of course, me and Tina, we are activists, so we are agreeing to certain stress in our life, to certain actions in our life. But we have to remember that LGBTQ people in general are not some kind of heroes or activists. They just want a normal, happy, simple life. Not even happy sometimes, they just want it to be plain. So in Poland, if you want to change your legal documentation, you have to sue your own parents. So you have to go to a court, sue your parents, because our loophole in a law thinks that it was them that assigned you the wrong gender. And the problem with that is that, of course, you can have parents that are going to support you, so they would go to this court and say, okay, yes, we are agreeing to this. But most of parents are not quite okay with that. And these legal cases can take several years. And also, oh my God, there are perfectly old people asking their parents for permission to live the life they want. It's just simply sick. There are only few doctors that are doing this, the whole transition process well. So also people from small villages, they have to travel a lot. It's super expensive. It's really hard for them to find money. Of course, the public health system is not paying for their meds or surgeries if they would like to have some. So there is actually simply no laws and no help. And especially in terms of COVID situation with the pandemic, they were the first people that lost their jobs, because usually they are not being officially, they don't have the official jobs in Poland. So the trans community in Poland is in really, really bad state. And I would post in the comment section in a second the name of the trans organization here in Poland. So if you are more interested into trans issues, I suggest to contact with them. They're super happy to tell you more about it. And yeah.
Okay. Now, thank you very much for your insight and your thoughts on this particular topic. And Krisztina, trans issues is your subject. So how is the situation, especially now with COVID in Hungary?
So how to summarize something in 1 or 2 minutes that I could talk about for hours? I think it's the same everywhere. Trans people need access to healthcare. Yep. That is considered to not be like basic care in many countries, and even in our context. In the spring, surgeries were delayed. Access to hormones is more difficult because you cannot go to see a doctor. Some doctors were not even available. So that is a big issue when it comes to healthcare. And the healthcare situation of trans people in every context, including Hungary, is really bad. We don't go to see doctors. We just don't get the same treatment as others because there is discrimination. Trans people don't like to go to doctors, not because they don't like it, but because of their experiences and the discrimination and humiliation they face. And if you put that into the context of a pandemic, that makes life really, really difficult for many in our communities. And it's just the same all around in this region. I believe that it's very difficult. And when it comes to having jobs, amongst trans people, there are a lot of people who are not employed like officially. They have lost their job. There are a lot of sex workers in our communities. It makes life very difficult for them because of the nature of this pandemic. They cannot really work, or if they work, then they risk their health, but they might not have as many clients as before. So it's very complicated and it's very difficult, and trans people are not doing good anywhere in the world. Trans people are marginalized everywhere, and the pandemic is hitting always the poorest and the most marginalized, the most we know. So in our communities, there are a lot of issues and problems I could list. I believe I have named a few that are really kind of special and really unique for us.
Yeah, thank you. So another thing that we have been discussing here in Germany quite for a long time has been the situation on what do we do with our city partnerships that we share with the Polish communities that have declared themselves as LGBTI-free zones. And the same issue could be implemented also on what do we do with Hungarian cities that maybe, I don't know, are known for not treating their LGBTI communities well and properly and the way that they deserve it. Do you think, Julia, that I'm a strong believer that we should, if it comes to a point where there is no way of communicating, that we should put on hold those city partnerships? Because I think that's at least my view, that an elderly lady in a small village will ask why the German name at the center, at the beginning of the city, at the entrance to the city, has disappeared, whilst it was there for years. You seem to have another approach, or am I wrong?
It's not a completely another approach. Of course, I'm strongly pro-dialogue, but I don't believe that dialogue can solve any problem of the world or every problem of the world. The problem for me with this dropping with or canceling the partnerships at the beginning was that they were canceled without any question. Like, okay, there is an LGBT-free zone, so let's cancel this partnership and let's forget that the Poland even exists. And this is the approach that we felt that happened at the beginning. I'm not sure if it was on purpose, that some of the countries or people from different countries of the European Union said, okay, let's just leave Hungary and Poland aside. Let's just like kick them out of European Union and we will be fine. And our life will be perfectly happy, which is simply not true. Of course, what is happening in Poland right now or in Hungary, it's disturbing. It's like this right-wing, the neo-fascism coming up to life is huge. But it's not only happening in Poland or in Hungary. So if we want to stop it, we have to stop it together, not only in one country or in two countries. Because in few years, if we are going to leave the situation in Poland that is like it is happening right now, we can have a new camps. We have a politician right now here in Poland saying that camps were good. They pronounce their political agenda as New Ordnung. So the translation is the same as what was happening during Hitler times. The LGBT-free zones are always in comparison to what was happening at the beginning of the Jews extermination. And we have to remember about that. So what we wanted to happen first, and this is what actually Germany did and did pretty well, was to ask questions. Why you did that? Because there were some funny interviews. Of course, they weren't funny back then, but they are funny right now for us, that journalists were going to these LGBT-free zones and they were asking politicians to explain the shortcut, the LGBT shortcut. And they couldn't even say what LGBT stands for. So these questions were supposed to draw attention that LGBT is not some kind of ideology. It's not like, I don't know, just a term in a dictionary. These are the real people that are living within your community. So what we expect from these partner cities is to ask questions, is to propose schoolings on anti-discrimination laws, is to promote health. If it's not working, then yes, of course, we have to somehow put this partnership on hold. But it's not that easy to say, okay, so we are dropping the partnerships. What we would like to do is to happen for these partner cities to go to these cities and to find this woman you are talking about, this old lady, and tell her there is not going to be anymore our name of our city because of what is happening in your city, because it's going to just disappear. No one is going to explain to this old lady why it disappeared, or they are going to explain it's because of these bad gays. If these gay people, they destroy it. So again, we are coming back to this really careful explanation for people why something is happening, because it's super easy, especially in these times right now, that everyone is super stressed with the pandemic, with the really bad situation in our country. It's really easy to light the fire and to make everything burn. So apart from these questions, apart from coming and explaining why the partnership is ending, is maybe a proposal not to end the informal partnerships. So maybe build a cooperation between schools, or maybe invite some of the young people to have a part in some kind of diversity program. Maybe exchange artists to have some kind of artistic installation pro-equality within these places.
So there are quite a lot of ways on how to deal with these particular city partnerships. And I have to be honest, since I am a board member of the Lesbian and Gay Federation in Germany, and I, in my activistic roots, would love to really hit on the table and say, stop it. I have to say that we as an organization follow the same approach. We are pro-dialogue. We are pushing for everyone to really keep these partnerships alive, to go and talk with one another. We have written a letter to all the to all the cities that have city partnerships with the Polish cities that have declared themselves to be apparently LGBTI-free zones, to basically giving them instructions on what questions to ask, what to do, how to write to their partners in Poland and ask them questions and request some answers. So, you know, it's a personal point of view. Sometimes I get so angry because I just think it's not possible that in 2020 we're still discussing these basic, fundamental, democratic human rights issues. But then again, it's important to keep up the dialogue. And this is something that our organization is pushing as much as possible forward so that we can support the community in Poland and in Hungary.
But you know, the anger is good. It's a good emotion. It's an emotion that keeps you going. And of course, I'm getting angry too. But the case is to always have this step back and think not what's best for us and for our emotions, but for the general good. And right now, crazy things are happening here in Poland, here in Hungary. But the only way that we can survive is to still believe that at the end of this road, there is this pretty equality world, or just the day that everyone is going to be safe. We will see.
Okay, well, thank you very much also for this insight and your views on this very particular topic, because it's a topic that we in Germany discuss on various levels quite often when it comes to LGBTI-free zones in Poland. Now we have just another 5 minutes to go. What I would like to do is I'd like to have a quick round where you guys have the opportunity to express a wish for the new year 2021. Something that I would like to remember then and keep in mind, because I'm sure that we get back together again in the next year. and continue this conversation and see what has changed, what has worsened, what has possibly maybe improved. Let's see how we can push for more intersectionality, for more working together. So I would like to start with you, Krisztina. Is there anything that you wish for 2021?
I wish for 2021 to not be 2020 anymore. I think that's my biggest wish. This year was just so turbulent. There were just so many things. May I wish for a calm and slow 2021?
It's your wish. You're allowed to wish whatever you think it's the best for you. Yeah. All right. Well, then let's hope for that 2021 will not be 2020 anymore. Julia, what's your
I wish for a wild 2021. I wish for as many demonstrations as we can hold, as many prides, as many parties that we can have. And what I wish for the society in Poland is to grow even better than it is right now, to educate themselves. Mm-hmm. And I wish especially for young people to find their voice, to really understand that they don't have to have PhD to be an expert on any topic. And yeah, I'm waiting for the climate strike this weekend.
So you're waiting for the climate strike. We are waiting to see what good work you guys are keeping up and forcing and pushing so that the communities feel well represented and have you as advocates out there doing this very hard work, because it is hard to be at the forefront as you guys are doing it, especially in the environment that you live politically. We know it's a huge task that you have put on your shoulders, and we admire you very much for the work that you do. I always say it's very easy to be a gay or LGBTI activist in Germany, even though we have, we have violence every day in Berlin. We have, we have attacks. We have a lot of issues as well, but it's easier, I guess, to be an LGBTI activist on our end than on your end. So thank you very much for continuing your work. And thank you for all you are doing for our communities. We are watching, we are following it, we are interested, and we keep coming back to you guys to help and support in every possible way that we have. And one way to do so would be, if I may ask you both to then possibly comment on the Facebook page in the comment section, possibly link the various pages of the Polish Pride Parade websites, because it's maybe easy to find the Pride in Warsaw, but then it might be more difficult to find it in other cities. So maybe if you can list a couple of them, we can follow their pages and write them messages. And Julia, you could do possibly the same with your organizations that are at your heart, where you think it's important that we follow their work and their messages. That would be amazing. And sure, my wish for 2021 is that your situation in your countries becomes better, either because the European Union is putting more pressure, either because the fundings are being frozen, either because society is going more wild onto the streets defending our rights. And I wish for that we meet again, either in person or again in a very easy way here on a talk like this one, where we can continue to discuss, where we can continue to exchange our thoughts, and where we can have the opportunity, at least myself, to learn from your experiences and your thoughts. Something that I am taking away with me is the learning about talking, not about the country, but talking about the government, who is responsible for the backlash that is happening at the moment. Yeah, and there would be so many more things that I would like to say, but our time is up. So enjoy your evening and keep up the good work. And thank you very much for all our viewers who have been following us on Facebook, and for all the questions that have been coming in. Thank you so much, and see you soon again. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.